What is up, everyone? Good morning again. It's April the 20 something. I usually get lost in the dates, but I think it's April the 29th. And it's your host, Carlos Ponce, and this is another live episode of Advancio Talks. And if you are just discovering us, welcome. But if you have been here since the very beginning, since 2022, well, you know what we are about. Advancio Talks is where we sit down with the people actually building the future of business and technology. Not just talking about it, but doing it. CTOs, founders, the folks making decisions that matter, building cool stuff. So whether you're drinking coffee, commuting, or just curious about what's actually happening in tech and in business and in the world of business tech, stick around because today we got Cesar Carvajal, co-founder of Chameleo, no M, Chameleo.World, with us today. Cesar's got stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else. And I believe that, Cesar, you're chiming in from
From
Finland, right?
yes, from Helsinki, the capital of
From
Finland.
Helsinki. Hey, it's just right around the corner, right?
Yeah, 10 hour
Okay,
difference.
perfect. That's awesome. It's very, very, very nice to have you here finally, Cesar. Cesar and I have been in conversations for a while, and I'm happy to have him here on the show. So let's jump right in, Cesar. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit. Let's start with you. Tell us about you, Cesar, your background, your journey, your story, how you ended up in Finland, anything you want to say about you so that the audience and myself, we get to know you better.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you so much for having me here and for taking the time to listen to people who build stuff, such as myself. So I come from a background of the kitchen world. I'm a chef by profession, and I did it for decades. And I noticed after I traveled outside of Mexico, these culture shocks that kept on happening. So in the management of the kitchen all over the world, we get so many nationalities, and this culture shock happens all the time, everywhere. So from that background, from that nationality is where I come from, and yeah,
That's
to try to keep it short.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. No, yeah, we just like to have an idea. It's interesting. So, how do you go from being a chef into the tech world? That's interesting.
I grew up with a very entrepreneurial family, and my dad has a printing business, and we grew up just talking business and marketing. And my brother is also in marketing, so we grew up with this in ourselves. And as a chef, you want to end up having a business, a restaurant that you call your own. And when I came to Finland, I noticed this ceiling with the culture shock challenge. So seeing all of this background and a problem, I met the founder. I'm the co-founder, and I met the founder, Elena Arola, who had this idea for the app. So at that point, we kind of like merged ideals and drive to get the project going. But the background came from business and entrepreneurship in the family.
I see. Okay, thank you for elaborating on your story. I think it's a pretty unique one, and especially for people like many of us, and myself included, we all have like backgrounds of people who started out, a business and emigrated and have a different, we switch nationalities or cultures or whatever. So I think that's a very unique vantage point, the one that you personally have. I can relate to it. I come from a similar background, but anyway, it's not about me. It's about you. So tell us about Camilio. Uh, what is your value proposition? What problem are you solving? Tell us about Camellia, please.
So the founder Elena and I, we discussed and researched hundreds of interviews and talking to people and other founders. And among the key elements of nowadays, like AI, machine learning, LLMs, etc., and everything was very machine level, AI level, tech level, or even technical level. And this soft skill or underlying structure, like the human communication, is really where we are focusing on. How people build trust, how people see hierarchy. In the app, we put together like these lenses to see cultures with, and the connection between people is what really we are focusing on in the app.
Okay, that's interesting. And why Camellia? I'm sure there's something about. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I sense that the chameleon. You chose the word camellia because it's the little lizard, the little animal capacity to adapt and to change and to morph, right? Colors and appearances and all that, right? So,
Exactly.
is there a relationship there? Is there a connection there?
Absolutely. So that a person gets this capacity to adapt to any culture and to expand its cultural awareness. But this adaptation, you're spot on, to become a cultural chameleon that you can adapt anywhere.
That's interesting. Perfect. Okay, so now let's move on to, I would say, let's move on to the topic because we have a topic for the viewers out there who might be watching. We always have a topic, right, to talk about. And this time we chose the culture bug in your code base. And this is related. We're going to talk a little bit about the tech aspect, but also the business side and the human side, which is the developers themselves are human. And that's very important for us. So the topic that you chose for today is the culture bug in your code base. So why remote teams fail and how to debug human friction. So definitely let's start there. Cesar,
Mhm.
why did you feel that this topic would be interesting and relevant for today's day and age in the tech world?
I feel that it's crucial that we come back to the human aspects, and step outside of the like technical capacities and go back to the human capacity of communication. So we see it as these multicultural levels. We see
Mhm.
them like as a feature. This
Okay.
friction is part of the friction, the feature, and not a bug. So we try to humanize, and we try to take the complexity out of cultural intelligence and bring it to everyone. So our app, which at the current stage is an MVP, we focus on this one core tool, which is a sort of cultural comparison, where you can choose countries, and a person nowadays is like highly connected with other countries and cultures, and the world is as connected as ever it could have been. So we see that it's crucial that we understand other cultures, and more importantly, so that we understand our what we call our inner culture, like how we see authority, how we see hierarchy, how we see time.
Perfect. Um, okay, here's what I'm hearing. Camellia helps make invisible cultural differences visible, right?
Mhm.
So, what was the moment that you realized that these invisible barriers were costing real teams real money?
Mhm. So the visible aspect comes probably in a report. It can come on the system dashboard. Those are
Mhm.
visible, and it's a number. Now, if we say it's invisible because it's human and it's like underlying in the problem. So it's very visible. For example, in my background, where a company has the culture, for example, Latino, where we see very we see time different. We can say like ahorita or tantito or soon, or we can say we kind of like beat around the bush sometimes. So in very concrete way, in my background, we would see a company that has some like a work culture that is very Latino. And if another culture comes in and does not understand our concept of time or concept, or doesn't share the concept of hierarchy, it would not come back. It would be very costly to the company to rehire it, if it's on a trial period of 1-2 months and then leaves. So this cost of non-retention or this churn in the staff is one of the main first keys. And we tend to think, oh, it's a system problem, or it's somewhere in my dashboard, the problem, or the framework that I have. But there's an underlying human difference that ends up costing money in staffing, for example.
Right, yeah, especially in staffing when there could be so much turnover and churn, as you mentioned as well. So I'm also curious because I'm not an engineer by trade, but I've been in business in technology, working in technology for many years, like almost 20 years, in communication, sales, and marketing. So I understand the market well. But again, there are some things that I'm yet to learn, because there's always things are changing. Every single day there's something new. So in the world of software development and remote work, we talk a lot about tech stacks, right? And time zones as well. Tech stacks, you have the time zones. So why is culture still the last thing that companies think about? What do you think it is?
For example, me living in a Nordic country, Nordic countries tend to have a lifestyle first approach to work. So or at least in Europe is more visible. The French, for example, we have a lifestyle first approach to life. So when there is a disconnect in an American or Mexican company, we tend to bring our, for example, workaholism or our hustle culture into the conversation. So if the remote worker is from Sweden or Norway, it's difficult to match that momentum or like that drive that we have in other cultures. So if we want to get something done, in some cultures, it needs to get done within working hours because they have a life after work. And in other cultures, we have this drive to get it done quickly, I'm available even after 4, after 5. On weekends, I'm available from half the day, or, like we're very like that. We're very driven to give our life into work. And some cultures are, I work and then I check out and then I do other things or hobbies, etc., like mental health, etc.
Okay, I understand. Well, that makes sense, right? Especially, I've witnessed it firsthand, especially the difference between what I call the other side of the pond, all the countries in Europe, Northern Europe, and Scandinavia versus the US and North America as a whole. There's an abyss of cultural
difference.
Yeah, because it's work first at all costs, and as you say, hustle culture and the struggle, and you have to be there, and you have to work on weekends, and you have to put in 80-hour weeks and all that, versus the other option, which is, let's take, there's some life to be lived, right? So, and I personally, even though that I'm on this side of the pond, I definitely relate to what you're saying, and that's one of the reasons why I've thought of relocation. But that's a subject matter for another day. So Tell me
And
something. Can you give us a concrete example of how a difference in hierarchy, for example, in hierarchy perception, say between U.S. product manager and a Latin American developer, can derail a sprint, for example.
if we're mentioning like as concrete as possible, a team that has United States member management, for example, or a developer who is from Latin America,
Hmm.
they are close to each other, even though there are other countries that are more polar opposites. But let's say hierarchy would be seen different, where in Latin America, we are a bit more, the gap between the manager or the CEO is quite far, and we see as respect that we don't interrupt the manager during a meeting, or there's a sprint planning going on, and in the meeting the manager would say, hey, are we clear? And some cultures could try to kind of like save face, or they wouldn't challenge the idea to the authority in the meeting. So the leader or the manager could think, oh yeah, everybody said yes, then we're all on board. But underneath, the the developer is thinking, okay, I say yes first, now figure it out later. And throughout the weeks, if the developer is going through struggles or is not meeting the deadline, the manager could say, "Oh, but you said yes. Oh, but you're being lazy, or you're not delivering." He could think that it's a performance problem, and the developer could think, "Oh, the manager is I don't know, a tyrant, a dictator. He's just impossible to work with." And they both are right within their space, and that gap is what cultural intelligence or cultural awareness will close. I don't know if my example.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm still. I mean, you clearly have an advantage of being in that part of the world of Scandinavia. By the way, is Finland still considered Scandinavia, or isn't it like
Not technically Scandinavia. The region would be Finno-Scandia.
okay?
It's part of the Nordic countries, so it's
Okay.
safer to just go with Nordic countries.
Okay, great. Northern countries. Okay, so it's clearly you have a deeper understanding of what goes on over there. So I'm going to be listening in to educate
Mhm.
myself on what you're saying. So thank you. So one of those things that I like to educate myself in is mm, time perception, because time perception is one of those things that uh, nobody puts in a job description.
Hmm.
So how can you tell me how a different relationship with deadlines, for example, show up in a dev team in the dev team's daily stand-ups? Feedback is huge in agile environments. So how does cultural context completely change what constructive criticism looks and feels like across borders?
Absolutely, very very good question, and I will break it down in time first,
Mhm.
and then constructive criticism. So
Okay.
in time, there are some cultures that are more linear, seeing regarding time, and multi-active cultures regarding time. Latin America, for example, is very multi-active. Like, we do one thing while we do another, and the contrast to other cultures, maybe even Germany or in Scandinavia,
Mhm.
would be one thing at the time and very linear. So they are a bit more structured in that sense. And if there's a deadline, for example, to deliver a project, like Friday means Friday, and they will get it done. And even, for example, when I was in Denmark, if a person doesn't deliver by 4 o'clock, maybe our culture would like stay over extra time on their own time and their own expense, and we would think, oh, I'm delivering for the company, or I'm really backing my company. I'm a more productive worker. But in some cultures, they see it as you should get it done by the time you said you would do it, and you should not take longer than 4 o'clock, for example.
Okay.
So if Friday means Friday, linear cultures would deliver no matter what, and some other cultures would see, okay, Friday means Friday, but something can come up. There's like more flexibility there regarding a time.
Okay. Yeah, and I can easily envision the possibility of, for example, of you being in the northern part, in the Nordic region, having a client in the U.S., for example, and the expectations might differ, greatly because they say, no, no, yeah, if you got to work, like if you guys stay up late until 11 o'clock at night, they expect you to do that, right?
Hmm.
And there could be a culture clash. So, of course, keeping communication open and just setting the expectations from day one. I think that would be very, very important. So, okay, let's move on to a different topic. Let's move on to the process. Walk us through what it actually looks like when a technology company or a product company such as Chameleo or a staffing firm, uses Chameleo. Where do they start and what do they discover?
The Chameleo app is right now in MVP stage, and we have the application itself that has its core tool, the country comparison. So a company would walk into the tool and see in a work related professional scenario how to break down the cultures in
Mm-hmm.
our 8 lenses of understanding cultural intelligence. So a company can see and break down the culture in its lenses in very relatable scenarios, practical scenarios. What does a manager would say? What does a worker and employee would say, etc. And that's on the, let's call it B2B scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Chameleo is also a sort of hub for cultural intelligence all over the world. And in order to really understand the culture, we are also getting a knowledge base from people, from managers, CEOs, builders, founders who are in the country and who are giving feedback to the hub, to the whole.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chameleo app, the web app, the MVP that you can try right now, it starts there in making practical examples uncomplicated versus a lot of knowledge base that is out there that is highly complicated and long words. We try to bring it down to a very comprehensive level.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I think I'm starting to get it now. So, I think there's also another element that I think it's worth mentioning. Uh, let's say that you take your Camelio, your product, your solution to a company, but let's say that maybe the CTO or the VP of engineering, for example, who tend to be very their level of scrutiny is very, very, very stringent, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many ways. For CTO or a VP of engineering that is skeptical or is on the fence about investing in cultural training, what would you say is the ROI argument that actually lands?
That's a very interesting question. If you're asking what is the cost of this knowledge and when am I going to get
Let
my
me put
money
it
back?
this way. Let me put it this way. I am a VP of engineering. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you come to me, and then I took you do a demo, and then I go, well, it looks interesting. It's gamified. It looks nice, but what is the ROI? What's in it for me? What's the ROI? How would you
Well,
respond to that question?
I flip the question into, well, what are you losing by not what have you lost? What currently have you lost by not utilizing this?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, which deals have you not closed because in the meeting you didn't respect authority with a nation market competitor or client.
Mm-hmm.
So the current costs that they already have could be avoidable first and foremost. Before, before seeing in the future, there can be already feedback in avoiding costs that are real in the company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. So there is a cost for the company that does not observe
Mhm.
the consequences of not being mindful of the cultural nuances between one country and another, one company and another, one language and another. So there's a cost. There's a hidden cost. That's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing, right?
Yes, yes. There's
That
actually
could,
this term culture tax that was coined as the cost or the price that companies are paying uh, for having this ignorance, essentially. Like how
yes,
many staff workers have, as we mentioned, churned, how many have left, how many deals were not closed in the previous year, and what was the monetary value of those of that loss in
yes. Or
deals.
how a project manager, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something that I just thought. You have a project manager in, let's say, in the US, and you have a team in Latin America or Philippines, and there are some cultural misunderstandings that become rework,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
rework is costly because there's a lot of back and forth, right? So it's like, oh, we're losing time. You screwed up here. We need to fix this, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is rarely mentioned as part of the costs of not observing cultural differences appropriately. And I think Camilio does a great work in helping us and helping companies overcome that, right?
Yeah, and minimize that cost.
Perfect,
Because
excellent.
this culture tax kind of like compounds. It's not a one-time loss. If you lose a worker because of a cultural difference, then the onboarding, the rehiring, the training.
Yeah, definitely. I'm totally with you. One last question because we're running out of time is you said manufacturing. I mean manufacturing. I don't know where I have my mind. I have
Misunderstandings.
you said misunderstandings happen because people interpret the same situation through different cultural lenses, let's call it. Okay. So, what's the one lens shift that would change global collaboration overnight if everyone understood it?
If it was a one switch, the single most important lens that I would say is moving communication from indirect to direct. Indirect would mean beating around the bush and, oh, it's kind of obvious, but I didn't say it. But saying things directly, like this is exactly what I mean, not how or when I said it, but like this is clearly, explicitly what I'm trying to say. I think that would completely change. And as a small follow-up, I want to point out that after who or what, like giving context or having this awareness of all of them follows up with that change.
Gotcha, gotcha. Totally get it. So, Cesar, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I wouldn't want to leave without asking you one more thing. What's your final words of wisdom? This is your moment to shine. So, how would you like the audience to remember you by? What would you suggest? This is your final words of wisdom for the audience in general. What would it be?
It's an invitation for everyone to introspect on their inner culture. You can check the app, but to educate oneself on what is my inner culture. How do I see authority? How do I see time? How do I communicate directly or indirectly? My invitation to see and introspect your inner culture will help you tenfold in your interaction with the world.
There you go. There you go, folks. Tenfold. Hey, that's pretty ambitious. but attainable nonetheless and necessary, right? That's great. So, Cesar, thank you. I really want to thank you for having been with us on the show today. Last but not least is how can viewers, either current or future ones in the recorded versions, can get hold of you? I am assuming you are on LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let's see, we have your LinkedIn here. Okay, yeah, we found it. And okay, folks, if you want to reach out to Cesar, you can find him on, there it is, linkedin.com, Carvajal Cesar, one word,
All
last
together.
name,
Yeah.
first name, right? So that's easy to remember. And also, how about the website? Is there a website you would like to share with us?
Yes. At Chameleo.World is the website, and the app is app.chameleo.world. We're also
Oh,
in
okay.
Instagram, and once you try the app, you can reach out anywhere, and we can do custom, personalized comparisons and insights about the inner culture
But
of
the one
people.
we're displaying right now here down below is that a good
Yes,
place to start?
yes, Chameleo.World.
Okay. Is
Fantastic.
there an email you would like to share?
Just reach out through there.
Okay. Just
That would be
everything is on
perfect.
the website, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so we have quick reminder. We have Cesar's LinkedIn, Carvajal Cesar, easy to find. That's very easy, very memorable. And also the website is Chameleo.World. Okay,
Exactly.
folks. So that being said, Cesar, there's nothing left for me to say other than thank you for having been with us on the show and for jumping in such a short notice. I mean, that was awesome, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you
So
so much,
you
Carlos.
saved our day. So, Cesar, please stay with me as we go off the air. And the rest of you folks who are watching, remember that every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we have an episode of Advancio Talks featuring those making a difference in the tech and the biz world. And so it's every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And just remember to visit our sponsor, Advancio.com, for more information on what's going on here, both in Advancio and also on the show, because the show is also housed there. That's where the website lives. And follow our social media, which are constantly putting out things out there. And without further ado, again, thank you and see you all next time. Until next time. Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you.